Hey, it's Zave. You should play Where Winds Meet, just straight up. If you're on the fence or wondering if the game is that good, the answer is yes, it's that good, go play it. If you're still here, then maybe you need some convincing or you just want to get someone's opinion on the game based on its own merits. So let's talk about it. If you're new to the channel, I like to break down a game into a few different categories: narrative, presentation, characters, gameplay, and if necessary, monetization. So let's start with the narrative. Where Winds Meet is a classic wuxia tale. Wuxia is a genre or fictional setting in Eastern, specifically Chinese media. Wuxia stories are usually about a hero or multiple heroes using martial arts to combat the forces of evil, usually led by an evil demon king or demon lord. And Where Winds Meet, we take the role of this baby. We're being hunted by what seems to be an entire military force. Apparently this man carrying us stole some type of jade, killed his dad, and then ran away. I'm pretty sure we'll get more context in the future because as of right now we have no idea who this guy is. He manages to successfully defend us and we grow up to be an orphan who is quite gifted in martial arts. We have our little sister character, Ruby, and the closest thing to a maternal figure we have Auntie Han. In typical wuxia fashion, it seems the story is going to be about how we become a great hero who combats evil and defeats whoever this guy is. I say it seems because the story is currently being time gated, meaning we haven't been able to shoot through all the available narrative content. It's being drip fed to us daily. At the moment, we're still in the process of mastering our martial arts, making connections with new characters, and learning about the world outside of our homeland. There are inklings of something more going on in the background though. We often see these little bugs fly out of major enemies' eyes or mouths after we defeat them. It seems like this bug comes from the main villain and is responsible for making people unreasonably aggressive and insanely powerful. There also seems to be something going on with our aunt and a man from her past known as Killer Blade, who ends up being such a bro. Essentially, the story is planting a bunch of narrative seeds right now that I'm assuming will pay off later down the road. There isn't anything very deep going on here. As I said earlier, so far it's just a classic hero's tale, where good guys fighting bad guys. That's pretty much it. That's the main story though. The side stories are where we get a bit more world building and more emotional stories. Don't get me wrong, there are two very emotional moments in the main story, but most of the deeper stuff comes from the side and exploration quest. We learn about various things from creation of certain martial arts styles, the origin of popular figures in the world, tales of local myths and legends, or just us learning new abilities from gods in disguise. The side content has so much to offer here in terms of narrative and world building, but that's enough for the story and stuff. Let's talk about the presentation. It's a mixed bag, honestly. See, the game itself is absolutely beautiful. Like, there's no debate or discussion there. You can just sit and stare at the landscape and be left in awe with how amazing it looks. Graphically, the game is very impressive, with some really amazing set pieces and cutscenes, but on the technical level, I'd say about 90% of my playtime was smooth, but that 10%. I had frame drops during combat, exploration, and cutscenes. It would just happen randomly, random texture pop-ins, and the audio, oh god. If you ever watched an old Chinese martial arts film, you know the dubbing is pretty bad, but like in a charming way. Character lips don't match up with what they're saying, the tone of the lines being said usually doesn't match the character, and the timing can be off, with some lines being said one after another without any pause in between, or having too long of a pause in between lines causing awkward silence. But it's all in good fun. The voice actors put emotion into their lines, even if it's the wrong emotion, and these stories aren't normally meant to be taken too seriously all the time. But I have seen some people say that they changed the dub to the Chinese version because they just didn't like the English one, and that's perfectly valid too. If you aren't familiar with or don't like the dubbing that wuxia media usually has, then I can understand switching it from English. But if you're like me and find a certain level of charm to it, then I think you're in for a treat here. One audio issue I won't excuse though is the missing audio. There are times when sound effects or music tracks will just stop playing. Things like my horse galloping having no sound effects, but then 5 minutes later it pops back in. Character voice lines just missing or being repeated instead of moving on to the next line. Cutscenes missing important sound effects for character actions or attacks, stuff like that. From an audio perspective, the game is pretty lacking and very janky, but from a visual perspective, the game is amazing. The characters are simple but fun. Our MC is a self-insert type of character, talented at martial arts, being able to defeat plenty of different types of enemies without any formal training, an extremely fast learner, being able to pick up new techniques just from watching somebody, guts of steel and a heart of gold. They're an all-around good person. A bit uninteresting, but again, this is a story of heroes and villains, so it's serviceable. It makes sense in the context of the type of story it is. Ruby is adorable. No spoilers, but she's our little sister type of character who is obsessed with being a hero. She loves to read about heroes, talk about them, and wants to become one in the future. Even in the face of danger, she stands 10 toes down on wanting to do what's best to help everybody. A character that I loved. Aunt Han is another character who's important to our MC, being the closest thing we have to a mother, but isn't as fleshed out in the story right now. The only thing we really know about her is that she's she's either one of the legendary heroes or has a connection to them, and that's because of Killer Blade. Killer Blade is one of the legendary heroes, but he's low-key more of a warrior who just happens to fight for the right side. He has no qualms about killing enemies and shows no mercy on the battlefield. With that said, he has a pretty sad moment in the story that made me like him 10 times more than I already did. A simple but great character. There are other minor characters that get involved with the main narrative, but as of where we are in the plot right now, those are the characters that we've spent the most time with and that have been fleshed out. Let's talk about the most important part, the gameplay. This is the most important part. Gameplay is by far the strongest aspect of this game. We're going to break gameplay into two different parts, combat and exploration. The combat of this game is unmatched in the mobile space. That's right, if you didn't know, this game is available on mobile, which is hard to believe, but yeah, it is. It beats every other game in terms of quality of combat, enemy interactivity, feeling of attacking, dodging, and parrying. So let's get into it. Where Winds Meet is technically an MMO, but it plays more like an action RPG. You can choose between two control schemes, but I'd heavily recommend the ARPG control scheme because the MMO one just feels a little odd. You bring two weapons into combat that you can swap between on a whim, either by pressing the swap button or using a swap attack. Each weapon has a light attack, a heavy attack, 2 skills that you can use, and then there are 8 martial arts that you can map onto your skill wheel. Every weapon has a different feel and different playstyle and excels at different things. There are also roles. When doing multiplayer content, each player has a role: tank, DPS, and support. What determines your role is the martial art of the weapon you use. For example, the spear can use 2 different martial arts styles, one for DPS and one for tanking. The fan can use a DPS style or a support style. The longsword, however, can only use DPS styles. I'm assuming they'll introduce more martial arts styles for each weapon, so eventually most roles can be played by most weapons. In combat, you get 3 defensive options: a parry, a block, and a dodge. Almost all enemy attacks can be parried, but it isn't a parry like in Wuthering Waves, where it makes the enemy flinch and fall back. Most enemies will just keep swinging and you'll have to parry multiple attacks in a row just to come out safely. However, if you parry a red attack, then you'll get to unleash a potent counter attack. The block is simple, it just cuts the amount of damage you take. I rarely ever used the block, I almost always went for a parry or dodge. Maybe when using one of the tank martial art styles, blocking becomes a lot more useful, but when using DPS styles, I was always better off parrying or dodging. Speaking of, the dodge is also a simple mechanic. You dodge out of the way of an enemy attack, and if you time it correctly, time will slow down for a second and you can get some counter hits in. Between the different weapons and styles that you can use, the different martial arts moves that you can equip, the various defensive options you have, and the variety of enemies, the combat in Where Winds Meet is good enough to warrant playing it alone. But that's not all there is to do in this game. There's so much more than fighting. Let's talk about exploration. As you go around the world, you'll come across different types of people. There will be side quests that will allow you to unlock new parts of the map, animals and masters that you can learn new martial arts skills from, new game mechanics unlocked by getting the exploration milestones like the meteor flight, enemy camps that you can clear out for rewards, and even more low-key stuff like becoming a doctor and playing this minigame to heal sick NPCs and even other injured players. There's also a minigame for verbal debates for when you need to non-violently convince characters of something. But what about travel? You can do all these activities, but how do you get from point A to point B? Well, that's easy. You get a sprint that doesn't take stamina when you're out of combat. You can triple jump, run up walls, air dash. There are mounts in the game, and finally the best part, meteor flight. Traversing this world is one of the most fun parts about exploration. There are puzzles, mini games, and enemies around every corner, so you'll never get bored. The final aspect of gameplay that I want to cover is the actual content. Besides the main story and exploration, what is there to do? Well, they have PvP, where you'll compete against other players in a last man standing type of mode, PvE bosses and dungeons that can be taken on with other players, quests that are co-op compatible, and world bosses that can be taken on with a team of other players if you're unable to solo them. And of course, because this is an MMO, tons of roleplay and leisure activities. Alright, let's talk about one last thing, monetization. Where Winds Meet is going for a cosmetic only approach, meaning that there is a gacha in the game, but nothing like characters, weapons, or gameplay mechanics are locked behind it. Only cosmetics like outfits, hairstyles, mounts, and visual effects. You can also buy outfits directly from the shop, and god damn, they are expensive. I usually don't mind expensive cosmetics because if they are unreasonably pricey, then nobody will buy them, and then smart developers would be able to see that data and adjust the prices accordingly. With that being said, I do hope that if they decide to keep the prices like this, then they at least make sure that they come with tons of unique visual effects and things of that nature. I want to get what I pay for. If I pay 50, 60, 70 bucks for an outfit, it better come with some cool effects, some nice, I don't know, particles flying off my fit, and all types shit like that. Overall though, I'm glad that there are no characters, weapons, gameplay mechanics, or anything progression wise being locked behind a paywall or a gacha. That's one of my biggest pet peeves in modern video games. So my first impressions of Where Winds Meet. It's a really good game, a pretty satisfying narrative, really good side content, great exploration, amazing combat, and the monetization, depending on who you are, isn't that crazy. As I said in the very beginning of this video, go play this game right now. It's literally free. I'm heading out. Have yourself a damn good one.